Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 2nd September 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Hari Bol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been discussing in detail about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in all my previous videos. So kindly subscribe to this vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my other future or past videos. Let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. In the past few videos, we are trying to make a connection between the three subtle bodies of a human living entity and its vibrations with the kundalini of the gross body of the same living entity and the three modes of material nature as mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita recited by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By now, we all know that there are four layers of the material body that entrap a spirit soul, a raw, unevolved spirit soul that initially comes in touch with the material world with the intention of lording over this material world. One such connection between the spirit soul, the individual spirit soul, and the material world happens. This material world gets visibly irritated. In that case, to avoid that irritation, it wraps this unevolved raw spirit soul with four layers of material body, namely the first layer of causal body of intelligence and logic, the second body of astral mind, feelings and emotions, the third body of etheric senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, and the fourth gross body made up of four elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth. Now, besides this, there is a catalyst called false ego, which bridges the gap between the three subtle bodies and the gross body. It is like a glue that pastes these four together to make the same raw, unevolved spirit soul into what is known as a living entity. A living entity may or may not be human in form. Living entities include the ordinary cell, the algae, amoeba, weeds, grass, creepers, plants, trees, worms, insects, amphibians, reptiles, beasts, birds, and so on, and ultimately they take the human birth. This human birth also has at least 400,000 kinds. In other words, the living entity may or may not have to take birth in all the 400,000 kinds of human beings in the society, but the fact remains that it has to go through birth and death through these 50% at least of these human species before getting fully evolved and getting liberated from repeated chain of births and deaths in this material world. We shall discuss about it in detail in some future video. However, here we are only trying to connect a, a gap between the subtle and gross bodies, the Kundalini serpent in the gross body, and the three modes of material nature. So let us begin with this theory in this video. The three subtle bodies, that is, causal intelligence, astral mind, and etheric senses, transmit vibrations to the gross body of the human living entity continuously from the moment he or she is born in a lifetime, with it ending when the same human living entity passes on. That means vibration starts getting transmitted from these three subtle bodies to the mind or the brain of that gross body, whether or not it takes them at that time, right from the birth and ending at the time when he or she ultimately dies. Now, as it has been mentioned, vibrations may be intelligent and logical, astral, that is, that of mind, feelings, and emotions, or plain etheric senses of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Depending upon the evolvement of a human living entity, he or she selects some of these vibrations to process on. How does this happen? There is a mass of tissues with trillions of cells, nerves, etc., which occupy the cranium of every human living entity. This mass of tissue is known officially as the brain. The brain of the gross body of a human living entity is just like the hard disk of a computer or a mobile phone. This brain, like the hard disk, controls, regulates, monitors, and orders the rest of the gross body. The rest of the gross body acts according to the instructions and orders from this brain. These instructions and orders depend on which vibrations from which subtle body that brain chose to process on. When such vibrations keep coming into the brain selects some of them according to the experience, education, intelligence, evolvement, destiny, and karma of that human living entity. When it selects them, it first chews and masticates on them for some time. By doing that, it extracts a juice which it allows to be percolated down the gross body of that human living entity. When it happens, this body reacts according to the juice that is flowing through its veins in the gross body. In other words, the actions and karma of the gross body of a human living entity depend on what quality of juice percolates down the brain of that gross body into the rest of the gross body. This brain is directly or indirectly a conduit or a bridge or a link between the three subtle bodies and the rest of the gross body. Now we will divide the three Kundalini chakras and find out what it means. Kundalini is actually an imagined tightly coiled rope of a serpent that is sleeping dormant at the base of the spinal cord of every human living entity. This serpent is full of energy. Depending upon which yoga, taste, preferences, evolvement, intelligence, and experience that particular living entity applies, this particular Kundalini serpent wakes up and begins to slither up the spinal cord of that living entity. When it does so, it finds some stations which are known as chakras and which are placed at equidistance between this spinal cord and the final cranium of that living entity. In other words, there are major seven chakras that are placed at equal distance or regular distance in the spinal cord of the living entity. Before continuing, let me remind you that all this is imaginary, subtle, and not gross. You can only experience everything in the Kundalini, but you cannot see it with your naked eye. Thanks to the performance of several yogas like Hatha Yoga, Tantra Yoga, Karma Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, this Kundalini serpent wakes up and slithers through all these seven chakras. The higher it goes and reaches the higher chakra, the more evolved that particular gross body or living entity becomes. In other words, according to the capability and capacity of a living entity, this Kundalini serpent reaches some evolved chakra among the seven chakras. Now, before we deal further with the chakras, first let us divide them into pairs. There are seven chakras. Of these, six can be divided into pairs of two each. The seventh or Sahasrara chakra, which is placed at the top of the cranium of the living entity, is directly connected to the soul or the unevolved spirit soul of that particular living entity. This connection is actually through the causal body of intelligence and logic, and hence it is also a part of the material body of that living entity, though it is directly connected to the spiritual world. Now we have got two items of or chakras in each pair of the total six other chakras. In other words, these pairs are as follows. Mooladhara, which is the base or situated at the base of the living entity, is the first chakra. Swadhisthana, which is at the space between the navel and the base, is known as the second chakra. Manipuraka, which is at the stomach of the living entity, is the third chakra. Anahata, which is at the heart of the living entity, is known as the fourth chakra. Vishuddhi, which is at the throat of the living entity, is known as the fifth chakra. And Agya chakra is the sixth one, which is situated at the center between the two eyebrows at the head of a particular living entity. So these are the six major chakras which are below the seventh Sahasrara chakra, which is directly connected to the spiritual world. Of these, the first two chakras answer to usually the vibrations from the etheric body of senses. The second pair, that is Manipuraka Chakra and Anahata Chakra, answer to the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. Similarly, the third pair of Vishuddhi and Agya Chakra answer to the causal body of intelligence. Now, etheric body of senses. They are five in number. They are sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. These five senses of the etheric body of senses are used to operate the five sense organs in the gross body of a human living entity. These five are two eyes, two ears, two nostrils, one tongue, and the complete skin and genitals of a human living entity's gross body. Without these subtle senses from the etheric body, these senses organs cease to operate. These sense organs are used only to carry out vibrations and their transmissions into the brain of the gross body and which emanate from the etheric senses. When a particular living entity passes on, this body becomes totally dormant and dead, and it does not answer to any vibrations from any subtle body. And that is why it is as good as total waste or just a part of this material world. It is made up of four elements, and the four elements leave this gross body sooner or later, leaving only dust or ashes in this material world of the same gross body which was active a moment ago, thanks to the vibrations from the three subtle bodies and thanks to the juice that percolated down the brain of that gross body. Now, Mooladhara Chakra or the base chakra is a part of the etheric body of senses. Similarly, we have to join it with the three modes of material nature. The three modes of material nature are known as goodness, passion, and ignorance. Goodness is directly connected to the causal body of logic and intelligence. Passion is directly connected to the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, and ignorance is directly connected to the etheric body of senses. Because the first pair, being Mooladhara and Swadhisthana, are connected to the etheric body of senses, hence naturally it is related to the mode of material nature known as ignorance. Similarly, the second pair of Manipuraka and Anahata, which is connected to the astral body of feelings and emotions, is directly connected to the second mode of material nature, namely passion. The third, Vishuddhi and Agya Chakra, is directly connected to the causal body of intelligence and logic, and hence it is related to the first mode of material nature, especially known as goodness. This we should remember all the time before proceeding further. Now we will start talking about each chakra individually. The first chakra, Mooladhara, is situated at the base of the human living entity's gross body. The Kundalini serpent is sleeping and dormant and lying tightly coiled just under that Mooladhara chakra, under the base of the gross body. When a yoga called Hatha Yoga is used by the living entity to activate this Kundalini serpent, it slowly wakes up. As mentioned before, this Kundalini serpent is a reservoir of energy. Now, depending upon the evolvement of this particular living entity, this Kundalini serpent slithers up the spinal cord of the living entity and comes to rest at one station, which is also known as chakra. Depending upon the evolvement of that living entity, this particular Kundalini serpent may come to rest at either the first chakra or the second one or the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, or finally the seventh. This all depends on the intelligence, experience, karma, destiny, etc. of that particular living entity. Depending upon these things, this living entity performs various types of yoga to make that Kundalini serpent of energy to travel up the spinal cord and reach a particular station or position, and thus that living entity gets evolved in a shorter period than what is being used by other living ordinary normal entities. We shall analyze this thing in detail in my other videos also. But here it suffices to know that thanks to Hatha Yoga, this Kundalini serpent has woken up finally, and because it is a reservoir of energy, it finally slithers up the spinal cord and reaches the first chakra of Mooladhara. Mooladhara is actually completely physical and sensual. It only usually answers to the etheric body of senses. It does not have the required evolvement or intelligence to think about other things in this material world or other achievements in this material world. We shall continue with this theory in my next video. Till then, I just wanted to tell you that we will conclude here as far as our discussion of this theory in this particular video is concerned. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter in this video. Please give me your expert opinions, thoughts, ideas, and views so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.